I was 9 when I knocked on the black iron gate of a stranger's mansion, with a plastic bag of oranges cutting lines into my fingers, and an empty stomach that felt like it had teeth. I wasn't thinking about fate or family or anything big like that. I just wanted to sell fruit and buy Mom's medicine before the pharmacy closed. Then the gate buzzed. The door opened, and on a small table by the staircase inside that perfect house I saw my mother's face smiling at me from a gold picture frame. Younger, brighter, alive in a way I hadn't seen in years. Tell me, if it were you, what would you have done in that moment? I froze. The bag slid to the floor with a thud, oranges rolling like small suns over the marble. I picked up the frame with 2 shaking hands, as if it could explain itself. The house was quiet, the way expensive houses are quiet. Like all the sound has been cleaned out, with the fingerprints, crystal lights above me, polished wood that didn't creak, a staircase curving up like a question, everything perfect and somehow lonely. You know what I mean? That museum feeling where everything is right and nothing is alive. 10 minutes earlier, I was a kid at the gate rehearsing my line, 5 for $2, 10 for 3. The intercom crackled, and a deep voice asked who it was. I said my name, Mary, and that I was selling oranges. Then silence, a long one, the kind that makes your throat feel small. Finally, the voice said, "Wait there." The gate opened, and a man in a white shirt and shoes, shiny enough to check your reflection, walked toward me. He moved like a person, used to making decisions that stuck. But his eyes were tired in a way I recognized. Even at 9, it's funny you can't fake tired eyes. They carry a weight money can't press out. "Come in," he said quietly. "I'll buy them all 20 oranges, $6, 3 days of hope." In a single sentence, he led me through the garden. Roses laid out like somebody made a map of color. A stone path that made you walk slower, even if you were in a hurry. Into a foyer that could have been its own zip code. "Wait here," he said. "Let me get you something to eat." And my stomach answered for me with a growl so loud, we both laughed. For a second, he didn't look like a billionaire, just a man who needed to hear a kid laugh. Then I turned and saw the photo, blue dress, long dark hair, the smile that used to belong to my mother before life taught her how to be brave every hour. I stopped breathing for a beat, maybe 2, when he came back with a tray. Sandwiches, cookies, a glass of cold juice sweating on the outside. I didn't even say hello. I held up the frame. "That's my mom." I said, "Why is my mom's picture in your house?" It didn't come out like an accusation. It came out like a question I'd been waiting my whole life to ask. Something broke across his face, the kind of break that isn't loud, but changes the shape of the whole thing. His hands shook, the glass rippled like the juice was scared it might fly. He set the tray down, stared at the frame, stared at me, and back to the frame like he was watching a magic trick he couldn't solve. "What's your mother's name?" he asked, his voice rough around the edges. "Clara." I said. He sat and stood and sat again, trying to hold himself together with posture. "How old are you? 9, 10? "In 3 months," he closed his eyes. Like that number stabbed, opened them with tears. "Where is she right now?" "At home, sick," I said. And even telling the truth felt like lying, because home was a 1-room apartment with a mattress on the floor and a hot plate that clicked twice before it believed in itself. He nodded, not the kind of nod that ends a conversation, the kind that begins a plan. He watched me try not to look at the food, then slid the plate toward me. "Eat," he said gently, "please." I ate because pride doesn't fill a kid's stomach. He asked when I'd last eaten, and my stomach answered for me again. He reached for his wallet and pulled out more money than I'd ever held at once, bills that felt heavy for the medicine, he said, and for food. "And Mary." He paused, really looked at me. "Is it all right if I ask you something important?" My heart started running in place. "Okay," I said. "Do you have a father?" The question I hated most. the one that made school kids tilt their heads like pity was contagious. I looked at my shoes. No, it's just me and Mom. Something inside him made a sound I still don't have a word for. He covered his eyes, he took a breath, and when he looked at me again, I recognized the expression from the mirror. Hope trying not to embarrass itself. Are you my dad? I asked, not because I was brave, but because the truth had walked into the room, and there wasn't space for anything else. He swallowed, honest even in the pause. I don't know, he said slowly. But I need to see your mother. He wrote down his number, his address, pressed the money into my palm like a promise. Tell her Marcus wants to see her. Tell her I'm not angry. Tell her I just want to talk. Marcus, I repeated, learning the shape of the name with my mouth. Did you love my mom? His face crumpled. The kind of beautiful pain you only get from the truth more than anything, he said, and I never stopped. I ran home. You should know that I didn't walk or stroll or linger in the big neighborhood that smells like sprinklers and new paint. I ran bag lighter, heart heavier. The apartment building on 7th Street was peeling and tired and smelled like damp and old stories. The door to room 12 stuck like it didn't want to be part of this moment either. Mom, I said, breath fighting my words. You won't believe what happened. I told her about the gate and the house and the tired eyes and the name, and when I said the name, Marcus, the color drained from her face like a plug got pulled. She grabbed my arms with a strength that didn't fit her thin wrists. What did he say? What did you tell him? Did he hurt you? No, I said. He cried, and that was it. The last rope holding her steady snapped. She said the words she'd swallowed for 9 years. She told me about a love that had felt like a home and a night. It was rated about a woman with money and men in suits and threats that grow teeth because money sharpens them. How she was 20 and pregnant and alone and told that if she didn't disappear, she'd be destroyed. How she called the next day and a voice said, Marcus never wanted to see her again, and she believed it, because fear and shame and youth work fast when they work together. Mary, she said, like a confession, like a prayer. Marcus is your father. Yeah, that happened. I cried, not because I'm weak, because I'm human, because that sentence cracked open a decade, and everything inside it, the birthdays we invented without him, the nights I asked questions. She dodged with a smile that hurt to look at the cheap candles on a cake made from pancakes, because flour is cheaper than hope. And then the new thing too, the one I could barely look at because it was too bright. Maybe we could be a family. Maybe the story that started without permission could still get a proper middle. We have to call him, I said. Please, she was shaking, but she nodded. We went to the payphone in the lobby because we didn't have minutes left on our cracked cell. She dialed with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, twice. She misdialed and almost gave up, then the line rang. His voice, Marcus and my mother, bravest person I know, cried into the phone. It's me. He didn't ask for proof. He didn't ask for anything except our address and whether we were safe 20 minutes. He said, sometimes heroism is just a time frame with a full heart behind it. He arrived out of breath, hair messy shirt, wrinkled in the way fabric gets when someone chooses urgency over image. He said her name at the door, Clara, the kind of name you don't say unless it belongs to you, and then. They were in each other's arms, two people who had been holding their breath for a decade. He looked at me with a question on his face. Is it okay if I hug you? I nodded, and he knelt and held me and whispered, I didn't know, I swear to you. If I had known, nothing could have kept me away. He took in our room the way you take in a crime scene when you love the victim. The mattress, the hot plate, the single window with the broken latch. He didn't judge us. He judged the world that let us live like that. We're going to the hospital, he said. Not a suggestion, a promise. We rode in a car that made people on the sidewalk look twice. We entered through a door that doesn't exist for most people. Dr. Peterson met us with eyes that have seen everything and still know how to be kind. Tests, blood work, x-rays, words that can eat your savings in one sitting. Respiratory infection is severe, she said. Anemia, malnutrition. All the things we already knew. With new names, the good news, she added, is that it's treatable. She needs at least a week here. Marcus nodded like he was paying a bill he'd been waiting to get, and he was in a way. We ate real food in that quiet room, not trays on wheels, actual plates from a restaurant that delivered, because money taught it. How chicken rice vegetables that looked like ads for vegetables. Bread you had to tear, he watched me eat. The way people watch a sunrise. I used to tell the kids at school, my dad was a sailor, I said, and we both laughed and cried at the same time. I wish I had been writing you letters from every port, he said. I'll write the ones I owe you. Then he asked for something that scared me a little, even though he said it gently. We need a DNA test, not because I don't believe your mother, because my mother will try to make the truth bleed. This will protect us. I knew what he meant. I'd never met his mother, but I knew her. I'd seen her type in the way doors close gently on the wrong people. The nurse swabbed our cheeks. Results in 3 days, she said. 3 days, which is basically forever when your future is a coin flipping in the air. Mini pattern interrupt. Stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind. The next afternoon, while my mom slept, and I colored on a blank page because sometimes that's how you build a future. 2 people walked in who weren't wearing scrubs, badges, clipboards, faces that had practiced neutral in the mirror. Child Protective Services, the woman said. We received an anonymous report about neglect and unsafe living conditions. She looked at the IV like it was evidence, not help, and at me like she was measuring whether I fit in a box she'd brought. Do you think that's fair to drop words like neglect into a room where a woman is healing from being neglected by a system, not by her kid? Marcus stood not fast, not loud, steady, and explained. He didn't throw money at the air. He put truth on the table, the apartment, the illness, the hospital, the DNA test, the decade of searching, the anonymous report that arrived exactly 1 day after he told his mother about us. He didn't accuse. He just let math do what it does. We still need to see the home, the man said. And I felt my mother stiffen under the blanket. Because it only takes one late-night knock to teach your nerves to stand at attention forever. Of course, Marcus said, but Mary will not be separated from her mother because of an anonymous call. Not today. His voice wasn't loud. It was a steel cable. They left with copies and promises to return, and the room found its temperature again. I looked at Marcus, he looked at me, and I asked the question out loud. Do you think it was her? He didn't lie. I think it was fear trying to keep control by changing costumes, he said. And I think fear doesn't know it's outnumbered now. The third morning, Dr. Peterson walked in with an envelope like it had a heartbeat. Marcus opened it with hands that only shook a little, 99.9%. He read, then laughed, not loud, but bright, and looked at me like he'd been waiting his whole life to say the next line. Mary, you are my daughter. I jumped into his arms and said a word I'd practiced quietly into my pillow for months. Dad pattern interrupt. Sometimes the miracle is just the right word finally fitting in your mouth. He left the hospital that afternoon and went to see his mother. I didn't go, but I can tell you what happened because of how he told it and how he looked when he came back. He walked into a house bigger than his, colder than his, the one he grew up in, where love had a dress code. Catherine sat at a small table with a big window and a china cup. He didn't bow to the script. He asked a question that doesn't let you dodge. Where were you? The night Clara disappeared, she tried to perform, to sigh, to say, "Marcus, darling," in a tone that makes words small, but truth can be stubborn when it's holding a recording device in a state where that's okay. And grief can be smart when it learns the rules, she cracked. Not completely, but enough to show the core. "I did what was necessary," she said, which is what people say when they confuse control with care. He told her about oranges and a hospital, and a girl with his eyes, he said. Daughter out loud, and that word rearranged the room. She went from denial to a kind of ruined quiet. He drew a line with a steady hand. "They are my family now. If you threaten them, you lose me." He came back to the hospital and sat on the edge of my mom's bed and took her hand. "She admitted it," he said. And I told her the truth about how this works. Now my mom cried. But it was a different cry, not panic, not apology. Relief has its own sound, softer, grateful, tired. We stayed in the hospital until the infection was losing, and my mom's laugh started showing up again, thinner at first, but real. The CPS people came back, peered at our old apartment, wrote a report with big words that said in smaller words, "If you listened closely, that a family being reunited is not a crime." Then they closed the file with a shrug that was almost an apology. We moved into the mansion on a Tuesday because new lives don't always start on weekends. We put everything we owned in one bag, clothes, my old stuffed bear with one eye, a small box with photos we never had frames for, and the number Marcus had written on a napkin as if I'd ever let it go. The house didn't feel like a museum anymore. Maybe because we brought noise with us, maybe because noise is what makes a place honest, he said. "Pick a room." I ran my hand along the walls like they were shy animals, and chose one with pale yellow paint and big windows that made the garden look like a secret you could keep and share at the same time. "This one," I said. And he grinned like a kid who got away with something good. That first night we ate pizza on the living room floor. Fancy plates still in the cabinet, because paper towels felt more honest to who we were. Right then we told stories, my mom about when I was a baby and how I slept with one hand in her hair. My dad about breaking a window with a soccer ball and how his mother didn't yell, she just installed cameras. We laughed harder at the second one. Yeah, that happened. The house listened, I swear it did, and decided to stop being lonely. A week later, when my mom could walk up the stairs without the world swaying, he took us to a restaurant where the napkins felt like new shirts, and the water arrived with slices of lemon like tiny moons. He held her hand. Looked nervous in a way that made him look like a boy 10 years ago, he said. I bought a ring. He took a small box out of his pocket. I didn't get to ask the question. I kept it anyway. I don't know if that's pathetic or romantic. It's patient, my mom said. He opened the box. The diamond was simple and bright and didn't apologize, Clara, he said, voice already breaking. Will you marry me? She laughed and cried at the same time. Yes, she said, yes. And he slid the ring onto her finger like it had been waiting in that exact size for a decade. Here's where some people will tell you. The credits rolled. Happy music. Fade out, but life doesn't do credits. It sends invitations. His mother wanted to meet us. We said yes with rules on our ground. At our table, boundaries, like fences that keep the dog inside and the coyotes out. The day she came, the house was quiet in a different way, the honest kind. She walked in smaller than the villain I'd constructed in my head, but still wrapped in expensive. She looked at me first, because kids are mirrors and judges and hope all at once. You have his eyes, she said softly, and my father's mouth. I didn't know what to do with that, so I nodded like a diplomat. She turned to my mom, and for a second, the air was made of old paper and new glass. I owe you an apology, she said, and the words tripped over themselves like they hadn't been allowed to leave her mouth. Before I did something unforgivable. I thought I was protecting my son. I was protecting an idea I liked more than the truth. I can't fix it. I want to try to be part of Mary's life if you'll allow it, if she'll allow it. Do you forgive someone like that? What would you have done, be honest? My mom looked at me because love that learned its lessons asks the smallest person in the room for a vote. I didn't forgive or punish. I did something harder. I said, "We can try with rules, short visits at first. No surprises, if you say one cruel word you go." Marcus stood beside us, a gentleness in his face and a line made of steel beneath it. Catherine nodded, and maybe for the first time understood that access to me wasn't an inheritance. It was a privilege you earn in small payments over time. Weeks turned into a rhythm. My mom got stronger, real food and rest and laughing in rooms that used to hold their breath did what antibiotics alone can't. I enrolled in a new school where teachers learned my name faster than my history, and kids wanted me at their table because I was funny and could peel an orange in one piece. My room filled with books and markers and a desk where homework didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like a door. Catherine showed up once a week on time, respectful, careful. She brought me small gifts that felt like thought, not guilt. She listened to my stories, sometimes asked if she could tell me one about her father, who grew up poor and moved to a city and made money, and lost himself a little in the making, about how she learned control because fear said it would keep her safe. She didn't ask for a medal for saying these things. She just said them and waited to see if the room would let them live. A month later, we got married in the backyard under string lights and a sky that didn't know it was supposed to be a prop. I tossed rose petals in a dress that made me feel like a cupcake and a comet. People cried in the good way, the way that makes their faces fold into love. Catherine sat in the back and cried, too quieter, but real, when the officiant said the words about love and sickness and richer and poorer. I watched my parents look at each other like veterans and rookies at the same time. "I loved you for 10 years without permission," he said. "I'll love you for the rest of my life with it." "You are my home," she said. You and Mary, they kissed. And it wasn't a movie kiss, it was a promise, which is better. Later that night, when the house was full of leftover laughter, my parents stood under the trees and whispered like people finally allowed to use their indoor voices outside. "Do you think we'll be happy?" my mom asked. "Not the fairy tale kind. The Tuesday afternoon kind we already are," my dad said. And for once, a simple answer felt like a contract, not a cliché. "If you want to leave right here, I get it. It's satisfying, but I want you to stay a little longer, because endings are where stories tell you what they're actually about." A few weeks after the wedding, I got a letter, real paper, real pen. Catherine's handwriting, neat, like it had a posture. "Dear Mary," she wrote, and then told me things about herself. Nobody had ever asked her to say out loud about fear and ambition, and how sometimes the story you think is protecting your family is actually eating it. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She asked for instruction. "Teach me how to be your grandmother," she wrote. I wrote back with something that surprised me by how easy it was to write. "I want you in my life, but not at the price of my mother's peace. If you love me, you love her. That's the math." She framed that letter in her office, I know, because I saw it and laughed, a poor girl's handwriting next to diplomas and charity photos, and I thought, maybe this is what change looks like in real life. Not fireworks, not speeches, a framed piece of paper that tells you who is in charge of your heart. We kept building a life not perfect, not without arguments about chores or tone, but solid. And then one afternoon, the social worker from before showed up again. Not with a clipboard, with an invitation. "We're building a community advisory board," she said. "We need people who've lived both sides, who know how systems can help and how they can harm. Would you and your mother consider joining?" We looked at each other and nodded, because that's the kind of twist I like. The one where a thing that almost broke you becomes a tool you know how to use. If it were you, would you have said yes? This is the part where I widen the lens and ask you the questions that live under the plot. What do you owe a person who apologizes for harm they did with power you never had? Do you let them back in the house, or do you meet them on the porch for a while? Do you think wealth makes justice easier or just faster? Because I've seen both. Money opened doors, and it nearly closed one on us with a phone call. Do you think what Catherine did was unforgivable? Or do you think the point of forgiveness is not to let the guilty sleep well, but to let the wounded live free? Tell me honestly, because that's where this story really ends, with your answer. I still touch the corner of the old photo on the table, the one of my mother in the blue dress, not because I'm superstitious, because it reminds me that memory can be a map if you read it with the right light next to it. Is the new one, the three of us not posed like a magazine but leaning into each other, the way people do when they trust the ground? Sometimes I catch Catherine looking at those two frames, her eyes on the space between them, and I can actually see the bridge she's building inside herself. Some days she takes a step backward, some days she sprints forward. Grace is messy like that. If you're watching this and you're in the middle of your own gate bag, cutting into your fingers, stomach loud, maybe you don't see the mansion yet, just the buzzer and the fear of pressing it. I can't promise a billionaire with sad eyes is on the other side. I can't promise DNA results and backyard weddings. What I can promise is this: love doesn't quit. It waits at the edges of our worst days. It learns new languages when the old ones fail. It finds the door that opens from the inside, you know what I mean. So let me ask you one more time, because I really want to read your answers, and because the comments on stories like this are where we learn from each other. If it were you, what would you have done? Should a grandparent who broke a family get a second chance? How many chances are too many? Does money heal, or just hurry up the part where people say the right words? What does forgiveness look like in your life? A doorway, a phone call, a framed letter. Tell me. Argue with me, correct me. Tell me where you're watching from and what you've lived through, because the rest of us are still learning. If this story made you feel something, anger, hope, both at once, share it with someone who needs to hear that the past can be loud and still lose. Drop your thoughts below your agreements, your pushbacks, your own twists. And if you want more true, messy human stories, told plain and real, hit like, subscribe, and stick around, because the next chapter might be the one you've been waiting to tell.